Do you know your apolipoprotein epsilon 4 status, your APOE4 status? You don't want this particular allele. It's called the shortgevity gene. When you have it, it predisposes you to Alzheimer's. All of us have about a 9% chance of getting Alzheimer's. Women, a 2-to-1 ratio, so even higher risk for females. But if you have the APOE4 allele, it bumps you up from 9% to 30%. If you have two of them, one from each parent, then you have a much greater, up to 90% chance. But this is not a deterministic gene, and that's what's empowering, and that's what's good to find out what your status is. Because if you have this APOE4 allele, there's so many things you can do to prevent it from manifesting into Alzheimer's disease. So this allele, you can have an E2, which is actually protective, E3, which is kind of in the middle, and that's what most people have, and E4, which is called it causes problems with cardiovascular disease, glucose, metabolic health, and it causes neuroinflammation. And so my status, I found out I have a 3-4. So I have the average gene, and then I have the bad gene. So I have an increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease from 9% to 30%. 65% of people with Alzheimer's disease have this particular allele. 25% of the population have this E4 allele. So it's a pretty good predictor of getting Alzheimer's disease. But like I said, this gene interacts a lot with the environment. So there's a lot of supplements, lifestyle interventions that we can do to make sure that it doesn't manifest into the bad type of a gene. A lot of my information comes from Dale Bredesen, who's a neurologist that studied this for close to 40 years. And he's implemented this program called the RECODE program, where he's actually, for the first time in case series studies, shown that you can reverse Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline through implementing this protocol. He wanted to find the magic bullet, which is like a one pill that cures Alzheimer's disease, but I don't think that's ever going to be found because there's so many, it's multifaceted. He found 36 things that help. And so he uses the analogy of if you had 36 holes in your roof and you could plug all those up, then that would, give you the best situation. So that's what we're shooting for. And I'm going to go over a few of those, but first I want to describe a little bit about what Alzheimer's disease is doing. So up in the brain we have neurons, and neurons communicate with each other, but they don't physically touch each other. There's actually a gap there called the synaptic gap or cleft, and it'll release a neurotransmitter, and then it'll induce action potential on the subsequent neuron. So in these synapses, there's some proteins that stick out. They go from the inside of the cell all the way through the cell membrane to the outside of the cell. So they have intracellular and extracellular domains, and they're called amyloid precursor proteins. There's 695 amino acids on, so it's a pretty good sized protein. And these proteins kind of determine whether we create amyloid beta amyloid, which is kind of the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease, or if we don't. So there's different things that determine which protease cuts it. So a protease is an enzyme that cuts proteins. So there's one protease that will cut it in 3 spots, and then that will end up making a 40 to 42 amino acid peptide called beta amyloid. And this beta amyloid just gets in between all the neurons and decreases processing and causes problems. There's some research that suggests it's actually reactive to like neuroinflammation and stuff like that as a consequence of it, but either way, you don't want it. And so the other way is a peptide, a different protease will cut it in just one spot and make 2 peptides. And these 2 peptides increase the strength of the synapse, the health of the neuron, whereas cutting it into 4 pieces, creating amyloid beta, decreases the strength of the synapse and decreases the health of the neuron. And it can even tell the neuron to commit cell suicide. So we definitely want that balance to either be equal or where we're getting the 2 peptides, because we want to continue neuronal growth and have that neuroplasticity that we can continue to process things and learn things. So Synaptoclastic is his term for, um, breaking down the synapses. Synaptoblastic is his term for building them up, and we always want to build them up. And so there's different things that will signal the either good or bad protease, the one that will cut it into too many peptides or the good one that will cut it into two. And so let's talk about some of those things. So trophic support. Trophic support is almost kind of like nutrition. Trophic support to these neurons. There's a lot of things you can monitor here. So if you have good trophic support, you're going to tip the scale the other way. So you want insulin sensitivity. So if your neurons are sensitive to insulin, then they will take that insulin and bind it appropriately and use that to strengthen the synapses and all of that. Another one is magnesium, and magnesium is a supplement. Again, this is a supplement I would have never taken had I not realized that I had this allele. I wouldn't want to spend the money on it. But you want to make sure you get a magnesium threonate, because magnesium that's connected to a derivative of threonine, which is an amino acid, will help it to get across the blood-brain barrier and get into the neurons where it provides trophic support. Selenium is another one that we could be deficient in. Magnesium and selenium are really depleted in our soils, so even if you're eating healthy foods, sometimes you're not getting enough of these. And selenium can be found in nuts and stuff like that. But selenium actually is involved in producing glutathione, which is our body's master antioxidant. And so that's going to help with buffering free radicals and inflammation. This protein, this apolipoprotein E4, actually puts us in a pro-inflammatory state where we have all this inflammation that's wanting to take place. So any way we can decrease inflammation is going to be good. Another one would be like taking omega-3s, because when you have too many, the ratio from omega-3 to omega-6 is off, where we have way more omega-6s that put you in a pro-inflammatory state. If you have the APOE4 allele, it's actually good to get your omega-3s in the form of krill oil, because krill oil will has some phospholipids in it, and those phospholipids help get the DHA that needs to get in the brain across the blood-brain barrier. There's some issues with the blood-brain barrier when you have APO4 status, and so you have to kind of make those adjustments. Hormone replacement therapy, you have to make sure you're in optimal ranges of your hormones. Make sure your thyroid hormone is in the optimal range. Make sure you don't have too much cortisol, so reducing stress will reduce cortisol. It's actually cortisol receptors in the hippocampus, the memory center of our brain, and when cortisol binds to it, it causes atrophy and breakdown and neuronal loss. So if you're estrogen replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy for hypogonadism, these things have shown to help improve trophic support to the brain. We also want to reduce inflammation any way we can, because this puts us in a pro-inflammatory state. So anti-inflammatory diet, lots of plants, cruciferous vegetables, omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. We're really watching glucose. Our bodies are only designed to take in 15 grams of carbohydrates a day. And so one soda puts you at like 40 or 60 grams right there. It's just way more than we were ever designed to process. These processed foods are something that's new to our system. And so eating whole foods, vegetables, these are really important. And maintaining body weight. So obese is considered a BMI of over, I think it's 30, maybe 35, but the main thing is just making sure the visceral fat is under control, because the visceral fat actually attracts white blood cells to come in and start releasing inflammatory cytokines, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor, all these different cytokines. APOE has been shown to affect 1,700 different genes. So it can bind to the promoter sites in the DNA like a transcription factor and actually turn up and turn down genes. And it tends to turn up all the bad genes and turn down all the good genes. It turns down sirtuin. Sirtuin genes are great for longevity. And it turns up inflammatory genes like NF-kappa B and tumor necrosis factor alpha. So anyway, we can kind of buffer all this extra inflammation with anti-inflammatory is going to be helpful. Also, just watching for toxins, making sure that we don't have metals or mycotoxins in our system. So metals will be like mercury. Mercury is in a lot of the larger long-lived fish like tuna and swordfish. The smash fish are the best fish. You know, fish are good for omega-3, so you want to eat the smash fish, which include salmon, mackerel, anchovies, and herring, and can't remember the other one. But those are all good fish that don't tend to accumulate a lot of mercury. And so being an APOE4 status, I'm really trying to watch everything. There's some blood markers you can watch. High sensitivity C-reactive protein, so high sensitivity CRP, HSCRP. This is something you can look at in your blood work, and if it's high, there's something causing inflammation, and so you need to get down to what's causing the inflammation. This is a protein that is secreted by the liver in response to inflammation. Another one you want to watch is homocysteine. I made a video talking about that, but homocysteine is associated with increased inflammation. So there's, making sure all your B vitamins, that you have methyl folate, methylcobalamin, which is B12, and B6 in its active form, if those are low or your homocysteine is high. Dale Bredesen recommends keeping your homocysteine at 6 or below. So that's quite a challenge. So you have to really be proactive in that. You want to look at your blood levels of albumin to globulin ratio. Albumin actually helps carry out some of the beta amyloid plaques and toxins. So we want a high level of albumin in our blood. So we want that to be at least 1.8 or higher. With all this inflammation, again, it causes the APP protein to be cut in this negative way. So we end up with more amyloid beta in our brain. It's really good to get deep sleep. When you get deep sleep, your brain kind of expands in this, they call it the lymphatic system, where when it expands, cerebrospinal fluid just kind of percolates through it and kind of helps clear out all the toxins and the beta amyloid plaques that have been created for that day and eliminates them. And if you're, so it's good to put a lot of emphasis on getting good sleep to help. You can tell when you don't have good sleep, your brain just feels inflamed. Another thing is, I can't stress enough how important it is to maintain metabolic health. So keeping your glucose levels low, your fasting glucose, your hemoglobin A1C, through eating whole foods and not eating foods with high glycemic index. Because when you start getting insulin resistant, your pancreas starts making more insulin, and it just keeps going up, and your cells get desensitized to it. It's like the boy who cried wolf. It just gets tired of responding to it, and so the cells just don't respond to it, especially in your brain. And if your brain quits responding to it, you don't have that tropic support, and you start having this synaptoclastic situation. So when you have a lot of insulin as well, there's an enzyme called insulin degrading enzyme that breaks down the excess insulin in the brain and insulin just in general. And so there's a finite amount of this insulin degrading enzyme. So if you have all your, and that enzyme actually clears beta amyloid plaque. So if it's all consumed in trying to deal with all this insulin, then it's not going to be able to take care of the beta amyloid plaque. So it's really important to keep your insulin levels low so that insulin degrading enzyme can be available to clear out the plaques. The apolipoprotein itself is supposed to clear out plaques, so the APOE4 is just not as efficient, so that's another way it builds up. So it's a lot to take in, but there's so many things that you can do. It's really important to find out your status and see if you need to spend money on these extra supplements. Some other supplements that I take that have shown some promise in eliminating beta amyloid plaques are ashwagandha and turmeric. And turmeric's also kind of an anti-inflammatory, works through the COX pathway. So that's some other ones that I actually spend some money on to try to make sure that I'm filling in all my 36 holes in my roof. Thank you.